here we are, second season of Fun Girl Podcast. So I have my good friend Nellie here, who also has her own podcast, which I'll give the info for below and everything. I did an episode for her a few months back, and so now she's honored me with her presence to be on mine, and I'm so
Wow.
grateful. So
So kind.
yes, of course. But today we are gonna talk about self-sabotage. I feel like there's so many different paths we could go on for this, so I definitely feel like this is a good time for me to talk about right now. Just feeling a lot of stress around this time of year and everything,
hmm
and can make me get a little bit squirrely, a little bit crazy. So, um, yeah, so for me, I will kind of start this off by saying obviously there are different forms of self sabotage, whether you're kind of like ruining our relationships with other people, or we're letting ourselves down by not doing stuff that we need to do for ourselves, or you just have a habit of kind of fucking up things that you shouldn't, things that are good for you, regardless of what it is.
hmm
Uh, for me, I feel like one of my biggest there's two things honestly. So one way that I've really had a bad habit of like sabotaging myself is when it comes to my relationships with people. And I'm not talking about like just boyfriends, but friendships too. And
hmm
I've grown a lot from where like I'm about to start this off at, but some of the first instances that come to my mind is, high school time where I'll say maybe like freshman year is where I started to notice that I would have these mood swings, or like I would be upset about stuff and I wouldn't talk to anybody about it, like my friends or whatever. If I was upset at them, I wouldn't say anything. Um, I used to do this thing with my favorite cousin in the world where I would get upset with her and I would just give her the silent treatment and just expect her like be available when I was ready to come back around. With my friends, like I'd go to school and I'd be upset about something even if it had nothing to do with them, and I would just like act really weird and be distant and confusing, and then when they get upset at me, I'd be like, God, I mean, why are they even mad at me or whatever? And though I've noticed that I've done that, I would let it kind of break a friendship over just kind of acknowledging that I did that and that I had those tendencies to sabotage my relationship. I would kind of find myself being alone until I found maybe like a new friend or like a new group or something. Um, I've had moments where people that I was best friends with from high school, they were just kind of like, I'm done with this. I'm not dealing with this anymore. Like, you do what you want to do, like just leave me alone. And that was kind of the first moment where I felt like so bad about myself that I was like, man, why am I like this? What's wrong with me? Why do I do this all the time?
hmm
Have you ever had anything like that with your
Oh, girl. Well, I mean, honestly, it kind of is the same kind of thing. It also depends on how you're raised, I guess, or what environment you were around. For me, like it was always like if TMI, but if my parents like fought, because obviously they're divorced, because it's 2023, everyone's
every
parents are apparently divorced. But they would like do the silent treatment. So if they were mad at each other, they would just not talk. So the house would be just silent. And so I was raised like that. And my father isn't a person to get mad. So he would always just, his way of treating things was silence. And then my mom would just cause a scene. So I got a mix of both,
Mhm.
unfortunately. So when it comes to that kind of stuff, it's like I would always, silent treatment was one of my main things. So if something was bothering me, I would always overthink it in my head constantly. And then I'd be like, well, you know what? If they're gonna treat me this way, I'm gonna treat them that way. And then I would just go along the way. But it's weird when it's one way and no one knows what you're thinking. So you're kind of just everyone's like, what is like your deal? Like what is going on with you? And more towards like when you were a teenager, like you said, in high school and everything, stuff like that happened. Like your friends would hang out with somebody else, you'd be like, well, why aren't they hanging out with me? You know what? If they're gonna hang out with me, I want to hang out with them.
Yeah.
So if they don't want me in their life, I don't want to be in their life, and just go do whatever, right? So I had a lot of friendships because I grew up in Australia. So when I had my friendships there, I only had two friends, well, three friends, right? So I kept my circle really small, anyways. But then before I came to Canada, I was with one friend, and in that one friend, we had a big group of friends that eventually ended up being just me and her. And all of that was to do with both of us kind of in a way of self-sabotaging, like whatever we wanted to. Like people were like, oh, you're treating us that way. We don't want to hang out with you anymore. So we didn't hang out with them anymore. And we did this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So at the end of it, when I came here, I was basically in three groups of friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I had three different groups and all was the same. And I was like, you know what? You guys are being weird with me and you don't want to hang out with me. So I want to hang out with you. So I
Right.
spent like a whole year of my life just separate. I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
anybody. And then I went to gym class one day in 10th grade and I met my best friend, who's my best friend right now. And she wouldn't come to class because she didn't like school. So I was like, great, now I have no friends anymore. And then eventually we kind of went along and then I met my friend group. And then along the way, we kind of all separated, except for my two best friends that I met then as well. But we've had our difficulties too. Like we have a hard time when we're younger communicating because if you think about it, everybody does the whole self-sabotage thing, even if they don't want to admit it,
Yeah.
every if they don't want to admit it. So we have had our ups and downs. Like we're like sisters, so we fight and whatever. And then sometimes if I'm just like being weird or whatever, they're like, "Oh, what's wrong?" I'm like, "Nothing." And they'll be like, "Well, clearly something is wrong because you're being weird." And then like if I bring it up, they'll be like, "Well, why didn't you say that from the beginning?" I'm like, "Because I don't want to. You didn't ask." And it's kind of like, and I thinking back, I'm just like, you were not the brightest because how are they supposed to read your mind? How are they
Ex-
supposed to know?
Yeah.
So for me, everything is like that. And I know like everybody does it. Everybody, even if they're in denial about it, everybody does it because it's also in a way, a defense mechanism of how you want to save yourself from getting hurt. So you hurt yourself first, and
Yeah.
then you're like, well, there's no room for you to hurt me because I've already done it like a week ago. I already
Right.
went to the worst case scenario. And unfortunately, I still think that way because my dad taught me that way, which is really bad of him. But he always says, but he always goes, when you say, like when I met my boyfriend, he was like, first thing you do is think of the worst case scenario because then you've already hurt yourself and you
Mhm.
already know what the worst case is. But now you can grow from that and say, hey, this is the worst case. So let me just go along my life and see how it is. Right. So that's a different kind of way, but it's more safer kind of self sabotage. But if I'm gonna just think about the worst case scenario and constantly go every day going, oh my god, we're gonna break up today. We're gonna break up today. You know what I mean? That is worse than being like, okay, I've thought about the worst thing that's happened. I'm just gonna live my life now. Whatever happens, happens.
Right.
So, but that was unfortunately how I was raised. I still think about that sometimes, but in a safer way, in a less sabotaging way. So it's always been like that in my life, and it's hard to try to get out of it, but you gotta just keep trying, and the more you grow you kind of realize things, so it's a little
Yeah,
easier.
definitely. And the thing that you said in the beginning is so true. It really depends on how you were raised or the environment that you were around. With me, um, my dad, like, I didn't live with my dad. He lived in a different city. So I was raised by my mom, and my mom had these negative tendencies that, like, we've since talked about now as I'm an adult, where she would be upset about something and she would just kind of like close off. And, like growing up in my middle school, high school years, we lived with my grandfather. So it was my mom, my brother, me, and him. And she would just kind of like keep to herself and just do a silent treatment thing. If she got
Mm.
mad at me about something, which when I was younger wasn't that often, but as I got older, it was a little bit more. and it would be about like stupid stuff, silly things, but she would do the silent treatment thing to me, and that gave her, even though, like I said, this is something we've talked about since then. I noticed now as an adult that was something that made her feel like she had a little bit control over a situation by doing that,
Mm-hmm.
the silent treatment
Yep.
thing. And so that's how I basically thought, because I saw that I was in that environment or it was being done to me. So I would do that. It gave me just a little bit of
Of
power
power.
over my friends. If they made me feel sad in some kind of way or upset about something, I
Yep.
felt like I could do that. And then this whole thing will turn around that I'm in charge of this whole thing, you know?
Yep.
And sometimes it would go south, and sometimes it would go in a way where maybe like they really did care about me, so they wanted to work it out, or they would kind of like, beg me to just like resolve this with them. And that is not really acceptable behavior. It's just really not. It's very immature and petty. But when that's all you know, that's
That's
just
all you know.
right. That's
Mhm.
what you do. And so I would do that a lot, where like you also mentioned, if people would ask me like, "Oh, what's wrong?" and I would say nothing, nothing, nothing. And
Yep.
then
Until
when
you snap.
yes, and continue on until either I snap or they feel like, all right, I'm annoyed by this. I've tried to ask you what's wrong. You continue to act this way. Like, I'm really kind of fed up with this. And
Yep.
so, that's another thing. And even when it comes to like relationships, I will say like two of my most character developing relationships, even the one that I'm in right now, I've matured a lot. But from like my first big relationship to the one that I have now, I've had instances where I would get upset at something that they might have done or didn't do,
Hmm.
and I would react in a way that it's like, I want you to feel how I feel. So I'm going to do something that's going to make you feel just as mad. So we're both down here,
Yeah.
And it would be like, I remember like a high school relationship. I forget what happened, but like the guy was mad at me, and he was like, I just need some space. And we went to different schools, so it wasn't like I ever saw him in
Saw
person,
him.
yeah, like at school. And so all day I was just like going crazy. And I remember I made like a subtweet. This is when Twitter was definitely more heavy. Yes, I made like a subtweet about him, or like something. I can't even remember because this is so long ago now. But uh, that is kind of like what put the nail in the coffin. Like, we were already in a fight, and then I did that, and it was just kind of like, you know what? I can't anymore. And I can fully accept that, because, again, that's how you sabotage yourself. I didn't want to break up. I just was feeling like upset and couldn't handle what he needed to do for himself. So I did something to just like
For myself.
blow it all up. Yeah, exactly. And
Oh,
I won't say it's as bad as it was back then, because I'm a lot more mature. But even now, if I'm stressed about something or feeling a little upset, every now and then you might say something that's like, you shouldn't have said that, but you just really felt like you needed to in that
mm,
moment, just to kind of get it out or let them know that you're thinking that or something. And that's how you ruin relationships. It's
yep.
not fair. But I mean, the sabotaging also, I feel, is like linked with our emotions and how
Yep.
well
A
we
lot.
are at handling them. And so
Yep.
it says a lot. Like, we're only human, nobody's perfect, but it definitely all connects. And it's
To each
hard
other.
to navigate it when you don't know how to. If we were still in those environments that we were when we were like high schoolers, with the negative things that we're seeing our parents do or ways of reacting, we would probably still act the same way unless we had some revolution. But until you either like take
Mm-hmm.
yourself out of the environment or change a factor that's contributing to why you act that way, then you're just gonna continue to do it, you know?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, no, I get it because it's literally sometimes I also do like catch myself still doing that stuff, especially when the relationship was like when the beginning of my relationship, I was always like I don't want to do this, blah, blah, blah. I'll like start a fight for no reason, even right now. But then again, he's a man, so everything he does just ticks me off sometimes. I'll be like,
Right.
"Can you grab this?" And he'll be like, "Where is it?" I'm like, "Right in front of you." And he'll be like, "Where?" And I'll be like, "Right there." And he's like, "Where?" I'm like, "It's right in front of you. Like, what are you looking at?" And
Yeah.
he'll be like, "Why are you yelling at me?" I'm like, "I don't know, I hate repeating myself." So I'm just like arguing over the dumbest things.
Yeah.
So I don't have to catch myself, but like it's it's hard to try to because you like you said it's to do with your emotions, right? And if you're hardwired in that kind of emotional reaction to something, it's really hard for you to kind of bounce back in a way. But you are like teaching yourself as you grow, hey, like you're not a child anymore, like you're not a teenager, you can't be acting like that way towards people. So I've
Mhm.
in that way I've matured a lot. Like back in the day, like just people were always in competition with each other and all that. So I remember going, oh, well, I'm never going to be good enough for this. I'm never going to be good enough for that. So I'm not going to bother with this or bother with doing that or talking to this person or be friends with that person. And I've
Mhm.
kind of grown to the fact that it's like, I don't care anymore. I don't know where you're going at, but I'm not going to ruin what I have or what I'm doing to cater to somebody else's self sabotage because I know what that's like. You know what I mean? Like if somebody wants to ruin my mood or ruin the way things are going, I'm just like, I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna go with the flow. Because at the end of the day, like there's only so much you can do because it really does bring your energy down a lot. Because if you're constantly in that place of, oh my God, what if this happens? I'm gonna do this. Oh, that's gonna happen. I'm mad at this person. I'm mad at that person. But they're never gonna ask me how I'm feeling. They're never gonna ask me. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I've kind of grown in a way that if I am in a bad mood, I go, I'm in a bad mood. Just don't talk to me. They'd be like, why? I'd be like, I don't know. I don't know, but there's a million things going on in my head. So just let me be for now. Just don't talk to me for a second. Like, just let me have
Mhm.
my own thing. Because I know if I say something, it's gonna come off totally wrong, and I don't want to say it because if I say it, then it's going to be like, oh, so that's what you really think. It's like, no, I don't think that way, but because it's what I'm thinking right now is what I'm going to keep saying to you right now. So it's kind of it's not as easy as it is getting out of that habit. It's literally like an everyday kind of process.
Yeah.
But some people really genuinely can't get out of it.
Mhm.
They are constantly like I talk to a lot of my friends that are constantly like, oh, I have this and I have that, but I don't like that. I don't like this. And I'm like, well, you're looking for reasons to get out of this. And they're like, no, I'm not. I'm like, yeah, you are because I used to do it all the time. Like
Mhm.
you're looking for a reason to not do something because in your head you're like, nope, I want to do the other thing that is the worst for me and I'm going to come out of it different. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a you need to get out of it, but you can't because it's so much of who you are and so of what you're used to. It's
Yes.
what you're used to, and you can't help it. And sometimes, like I'm 31 years old now, so I literally every once in a while I catch myself doing it. I'm just like, what am I doing? What am
Yeah.
I doing? But then
It's
again, it's I can't help it. It's something that is gonna linger there for the rest of my life, unfortunately.
mhm. It is so hard. I know what you mean because even just recently for me, I'm like finding myself in like a little discussion with my boyfriend and I'm like noticing after I said something, I'm like that that wasn't great of me to
Period.
say or to do, and that's something that like old me would do, it's like say, well, you blah blah blah, and so
Yep.
I will say, like, even though like I'm in therapy, I go to therapy every 2 weeks, and I have done this religiously for years. Even still, you can do the step works. You can be in therapy. You can actively try to fix and, make yourself be this person that doesn't do these things anymore, but they'll still come up every now and then because it's deeply
It's who
wired.
you are.
And like the people who find themselves having such a hard time breaking that, it's really because they're not really trying that much. And even though it is hard,
Or they don't want to.
yeah, like you don't want to. And like I've known people that are like, this is just how I am. This is who I've always
Accept me for who I am. If you don't
Yeah,
accept me for me, then you don't want me at all. Oh my god.
yeah. And
Annoys me.
that gets so infuriating, especially when you yourself are aware that you can break those bad habits or not completely like break them, but work on it to
Try.
the extent that it's not something you do normally. But it's just it sucks. And along with something you had mentioned a few moments ago there, I feel like even outside of relationships, to myself, I will do things that doesn't have anything to do with anyone else, but they'll poorly affect me because I just have these bad tendencies. So when I think about it, something like school comes to mind. I'm still in college right now and have about another year-ish left. I probably would have finished school a lot sooner, but because like I transitioned from doing the on campus thing to doing it online, it's made me become a more lazy student. And over time, I've developed this habit of being like, oh, well, it's not due till then, and I don't have a class to go to tomorrow where I have to
I'll
give
do it later.
yeah, I can do it later. And then I've like fucked myself over because I don't turn the assignment in or I turn it in late. Or I think, oh, maybe this teacher's nice. I can get them to let me turn it in even though they said no late assignments. Like I have done that to myself to the point where I've pushed back my graduation date, which is not the end of the world. I'm trying to come to accept that. It's just, it sucks because even though when I started this journey, knowing that I wanted to get a degree, I'm like, all right, this is what I'm doing. This is when I'll be done. This is kind of how I envision it all going. Even though things don't always go according to plan, there are still things that you can do to kind of mess it up along the way. And so
Yep.
me like failing a class from laziness or screwing myself over, those things were so hard for me to break. And I'm only just now really doing the step work on that front to not further set myself back. And even though I felt like so disappointed in myself and like upset after I would see like, oh, well, I failed. I thought I could pull this off last minute and it would work out. I would do it again sometimes and it would be like, why can't I fix this? But honestly, it's just because I wasn't trying hard enough. The motivation wasn't there for me to kind of change those bad habits that I was doing. And
Yeah.
that even goes into like going to the gym. I'll slack on going to the gym. And like for me personally, I had a goal for myself. And then once I reach a certain level, I guess, or a tone that I was aiming for, then I'm like, well, I could
I'm
go
there.
I could go a little without going to the gym, and then next thing you know, I've gained more weight than me personally, like I felt was acceptable. And then I'm like, man, why did I do that to myself? Why did I stop when I was just getting the ball rolling? And I sometimes I feel like I don't even have an answer to give myself other than like laziness, or maybe I shut down because mentally I was going through something and it was like hard to pull myself out of it. But sometimes you got to give yourself grace. Sometimes you got to kick your own ass to get back up and fix it or work on it at least, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely that because especially the like doing it to yourself, like kind of tendencies, I'm like that even still now, and I try to kind of get out of it. I'm just like, oh, but I can do that later, or I'm this, and then it kind of comes up as like lazy. Same with me trying to post more, like content wise. Like I love doing the podcasting, I love doing my YouTube, and then my ADHD kicks in, and I'm just like, yeah, I plan everything, like I
Right?
multiple plan everything, write it down, do whatever, set the dates on there, and then I'm like, oh, when it comes to doing it that day, and I'd be like, oh, but I'll just do it later on in the day. I'm just gonna relax for
Mhm.
today. I'm just gonna just like I don't normally chill. I'm just gonna chill by myself. I'm gonna watch some TV. I
Yeah.
watch TV, and then it's like 12 o'clock, and then it's like, okay, let's start now. It's like, okay, just maybe just after this episode or after I do this. Okay, I'll do it like an hour, and then I'm just like, oh, it's been 4 months since I posted last. You
Right?
know, it's like, where did it go? And I'm out here like expecting people to still be continuing to watch or continue to hear what I'm
Feel
saying. It's like, if
interest.
you're not consistent, they're gonna forget about you. And in my head, it's like, oh, but they've already forgotten about you. Oh, my light turned off.
Oh.
I'm gonna be like, oh, they forgot about you, so it doesn't matter, right?
Mhm.
So I automatically go into the whole they don't care, and it is what it is. Oh, it's like a rainbow going on up in
Yeah,
here.
I know.
So hey, what's going on? But no, I did this. I do it like constantly, even with putting away laundry. My mother, bless her soul, I'm 31 years old. Okay, everyone's gonna make fun of me for this. I usually just like do my laundry and come back upstairs, but because I live at home, Persian, that's what I do. Um, my mom, when I'm like, hey mom, can you grab my laundry? Just leave it upstairs and I'll come bring it up. And then I come down to pick my laundry up, and she's folded my clothes. I'm like, Mom, why did you fold my clothes? And she's like, oh, I was just sitting here watching TV anyways. I didn't have anything to do. I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. And then in my head, I'm like, I'm not gonna put this laundry away because it's already folded.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sit in my basket for a little bit. Oh, it doesn't matter if I do it later on. It's fine. And then like a week, and then I'm at my boyfriend's house for like 5 days. By the time I go home again, that's laundry's been sitting there for 6 days. So it
Mhm.
kind of goes on and on and on and on. And I'm just like, okay, but like you want to get up and do something because you're not doing what you need to do.
Right.
And it's just kind of it's hard to try to get out of that because it's all about like, oh, just the laziness of it all, and just I don't wanna, but maybe later I have time, I have this, but you technically don't have any of that,
Mhm.
right? And especially when you get like tired. So that's why when you try to like change that about yourself, it goes well for a little bit, and then you start to decline a little bit because you're like, I tried so hard last time and I did it. So if I take a break, it'll be fine. Like
Mhm.
I'll be okay. But it's like, come on, like you can't just stop yourself because you thought, hey, I did well. That means I'm gonna do well again. Like, no, you can't. And then the failure in your head is like, well, you're gonna fail when you go to do it again. Like when you start up again, what you were doing before is gonna fail.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just like, oh, it's so annoying. So I try to like in a way get myself out of that and try to fix things. So again, the whole content thing, because I got so lazy and I stopped. And I was like, what's the point? No one's watching. What are these 3 plays on my Spotify plays gonna do for me? What are these 15 views gonna do for me? Like sabotaging myself in a way of like, no
Mhm.
one cares. No one does it. But at the end of the day, if it's what you enjoy and what you like doing, it shouldn't matter if there's 5 people watching or 3 people watching or one person watching. At the end of the day, that one person is still watching and they've
Mhm.
watched enough to see what you've got to say. So I start like planning things again. I'm just like, after this whole thing, I was like, you know what? I need to get back on it because like, what am I waiting for? Because I've
Mhm.
done enough to ruin it for myself. I stopped making videos and like, I'm blaming it on the fact that I'm busy, which not really. I work 8 o'clock to 5 p.m. and then I go to the gym until like 7 and then I'm home by 7:30. So I have time.
Yeah.
If you think about it logically, I got an hour to spare,
Mhm.
but I just choose not to because I'm like, I'll do it later. Who's gonna watch it anyhow? No one cares.
Yeah.
So it's hard to try to get yourself out of that mindset because you're so used to it. And even if you try, no matter how old you are in life, you're gonna keep going through that up and down because you can't help it.
Right.
Because nobody can heal from any sort of self sabotage any sort of trauma. No one is fully healed from anything. You are just half. You are just existing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just existing, and you're trying to do better than it. But
Mm-hmm.
that's all that it is for me, to be very honest.
No, I mean, that was so real. It even goes into this podcast, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
trying to start anything up back in my old YouTube days. And it used to be fun to do it. But then when you actually start it and you're like, man, I only had like 5 views. This doesn't matter. It makes you feel less motivated. And that's what
Yep.
happened to me earlier this year with season 1. It's like, all right, I had the ball moving. I felt so motivated until I didn't, until it stopped. And then
Yeah.
it's just like, you know what? I'm going through stuff too. It's fine. No one will notice if I skip a week. And then the
Yep.
turns into you never posted again. And
Yep.
I don't know. I just felt like I can't let this die out. And that goes for everything. Like, you kind of have to choose to not let something die away or to let it fail. Sometimes things are out of your control, but in a
Yep.
case like this, it's just more about like motivation and consistency. And it's so hard, especially when you don't really know how to do it that well. But when I think of that, I feel like sometimes you're either type A or you're type B, where I feel like type A people are on top of a schedule, a system. They always do what they need to do for the most part. Maybe they feel a bunch of anxiety all the time, but they do what they need
Yeah.
to
But they
do.
do it. Yep.
And then you have type B, where it seems like we're kind of type B and um, kind of feel like, well, I could do it after this episode, maybe after the next one, maybe
Yep.
tomorrow, maybe I'll do it later tonight, and then it just never happens, or you're turning something in late, or you are like kind of abandoning this thing that you worked so hard towards and you put a lot of thought and planning into, and so sometimes I honestly just I think about that and like I have to do better. But like you said, it
Yep.
doesn't end one day and you're just better. It's honestly
Yep.
like whether you're 20 or you're 40, sometimes it's like you're just fighting the battle every day to try
Yep.
and do what you need to do or be better,
Yep.
not behave in the same ways that you did before. And so it can be a lot. And I feel like if you're the type of person who gets easily defeated, then it's even worse. It's
Mhm.
it's all like a mental game. It really
It's
is.
all mental.
And so, for me, every day, I feel like my two biggest habits, my self sabotage that I'm trying to break is doing my schoolwork and staying consistent with that and trying to not do things to ruin relationships with people. And I feel like it's
Yep.
always a thought in the back of my head. And
Yep.
hey, I mean, everybody has their own things, like how those are mine too. You have your own. It's just who I am.
It's
And
hard.
yeah, it's hard. It's who I am and who I have to choose to be every day to be better.
Mhm.
With that being said, I feel like sometimes we need to pat ourselves on the back a little bit for
Yeah.
what we do because we probably like I don't know about you, but with me, I don't give myself enough credit. I really don't. And
No, I
that
agree.
contributes to why
W-
things are how they are, why I fall
Yep.
doing those things. So um, not like you deserve a cookie for every good thing that you do, but sometimes it is nice to have a cookie after you can notice.
You've done something.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I get it. No, I'm the same. I get it.
so with all that being said, I feel like that kind of really does it for me. I feel like it was really where my thoughts are, where I'm
Mhm.
at with it, and I wish I had more advice on how to fix it, but honestly, it's just
You can't.
yeah. So to everybody who listened to this, I hope that you did take something away from this, or maybe you felt like this was a little bit relatable to you. But I wish I had a playbook on how to stop self sabotaging. But like Nellie said, it goes into traumas and triggers and environments and defense mechanisms, and those are
Mm-hmm.
really heavy things that you can't always fix, especially not in a day. Sometimes it takes more to work on all of that. So
Yep,
we all just do the best that we can and just move on, keep moving forward through it all.
that's right.
But yeah, I think that kind of does it for me. So I want to thank you so much for joining and everything. And
Thank you for having me.